The Galactic Council chamber was a sprawling amphitheater of shimmering crystal and pulsating light, its opulence designed to reflect the grandeur of the empire it governed. But for Krell Zinther, a battle-worn veteran with a face marked by the scars of countless skirmishes, the splendor felt suffocating. He stood at the center, a solitary figure dwarfed by the immense holograms of the Empire's leaders who loomed above him, their voices echoing with self-assured arrogance. "Esteemed Council," Krell began, his gravelly voice steady despite the growing tension in the room. "I come before you not out of loyalty, but out of duty. Earth is not the insignificant planet you believe it to be. Its people, its soldiers—" "Enough, Krell," interrupted High Chancellor Voris, his tone sharp with impatience. "We've indulged your tales long enough. Earth is a primitive rock with primitive inhabitants. Their soldiers are barely out of the Stone Age compared to our might." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber, but Krell pressed on, his fists clenched at his sides. "You dismiss them because you've never faced them. I have. I've seen their resolve, their unpredictability. They don't fight like us. They don't think like us. And that makes them dangerous." A younger counselor leaned forward, his voice laced with condescension. "You're speaking of a species that relies on combustion engines for space travel, Krell. What could they possibly have to threaten us?" Krell's mind flashed back to the chaos of that battlefield years ago, to the shouts of his comrades, and the unrelenting advance of Earth soldiers through terrain that no army should have been able to navigate. "They don't fight with technology alone," he said, his voice rising with urgency. "They fight with instinct, with ingenuity. When their weapons fail, they adapt. When their leaders fall, they rise. And when they're cornered, they don't surrender. They become even more lethal." The chamber fell silent for a moment, but it wasn't the thoughtful silence Krell had hoped for. It was the heavy quiet of disinterest. High Chancellor Voris leaned back in his floating seat, his expression one of supreme confidence. "Thank you, Krell, for your colorful recounting. But the Council has decided. Earth will be brought into the fold of the Empire. If they resist, they will be subdued." Subdued. The word lingered in Krell's mind as he left the chamber, his protests dismissed. He had done all he could to warn them, and now, all he could do was watch as the Empire prepared for its inevitable mistake. The invasion began with a spectacle of force. The Empire's fleet appeared in Earth's orbit like a storm of fireflies, their gleaming ships casting long shadows over the planet below. Holographic messages were broadcast across every screen, every frequency, demanding Earth's unconditional surrender. For a moment, it seemed as if the Council's arrogance might be justified. Earth's government scrambled to respond, their fragmented militaries struggling to coordinate against an enemy whose technology they could barely comprehend. But then came the first skirmish. A detachment of Empire ground forces descended into a densely forested region, their sleek exosuits shimmering with cloaking technology. Their mission was simple: secure a key communication hub and disable Earth's ability to coordinate its defense. They expected a swift surgical operation. What they encountered instead was chaos. The humans struck without warning, their attacks crude but devastatingly effective. Explosions erupted from the undergrowth as Earth soldiers used improvised explosives to disable the aliens' advanced equipment. A squad of Empire troops was lured into a narrow ravine, only to find themselves trapped as the humans triggered a landslide, burying them under tons of debris. One soldier, an officer named Ralek, managed to send a desperate transmission before his unit was wiped out. They're everywhere. They don't fight fair. They don't." His voice was cut off by a burst of static, and then nothing. The Council dismissed the loss as an anomaly, a minor setback. But Krell, watching from the safety of his quarters aboard the flagship, knew better. He could see the pattern emerging, the same pattern he had witnessed during his own encounters with Earth soldiers. They were using their terrain, their resourcefulness, to turn the Empire's advantages against them. The next engagement was even more disastrous. A fleet of Empire drones was dispatched to neutralize a human stronghold, their artificial intelligence programmed to outmaneuver and outgun anything in their path. But as the drones approached their target, they began to malfunction. Their systems flickered and failed, their sleek forms crashing to the ground in heaps of smoldering metal. It wasn't until later that the Empire's technicians discovered the cause. A group of human hackers had infiltrated the drone's programming, rewriting their code with nothing more than salvaged equipment and ingenuity. The humans had turned the Empire's own weapons against them, using the drones to launch a counterattack that decimated an entire battalion. For Krell, the reports were both vindication and despair. He had tried to warn the Council, but they had refused to listen. Now, the price of their arrogance was being paid in blood. Late one night, as the Empire's forces regrouped for another assault, Krell found himself pacing the observation deck of the flagship. Below him, Earth's surface glimmered with the lights of its cities, each one a beacon of defiance. He couldn't help but feel a grudging admiration for the humans. They were outmatched, outgunned, and outnumbered, yet they refused to break. A voice startled him from his thoughts. "You tried to warn them, didn't you?" Krell turned to see a young officer standing behind him, her expression one of quiet understanding. Her name was Elin Reyes, a junior strategist who had joined the Empire's forces only recently. "I did," Krell admitted. "But they wouldn't listen." Elin nodded, her gaze drifting to the planet below. "I've seen the reports. The humans, they're different. They don't just fight for survival. They fight for each other, for something bigger than themselves. It's unsettling." Krell let out a bitter laugh. Unsettling doesn't even begin to cover it. They're not just soldiers. They're survivors. And that makes them the most dangerous enemy we've ever faced. Elin hesitated before speaking again. "Do you think we can win?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fears. Krell didn't answer right away. He didn't have the heart to tell her what he truly believed, that the Empire's pride had already doomed them. Instead, he turned back to the viewport, his eyes fixed on the planet below. "If the Council doesn't change its strategy," he said at last, "then this war won't end with victory. It will end with the Empire learning a lesson it should have learned a long time ago." And as the first rays of Earth's sun began to crest the horizon, painting the observation deck in hues of gold and crimson, Krell could only hope that the lesson wouldn't come too late. The warships of the Galactic Empire hung like a second, metallic sky over Earth, their vast, looming forms blotting out the stars. From the ground, humanity could only watch, stunned, as the broadcast came. A voice, calm and commanding, spoke in every language known to man, demanding surrender. The message repeated, each iteration a cold reminder of what waited if humanity refused. On board the Empire's flagship, Krell Zinter stood at the observation deck, his gaze fixed on the blue-green or below. Despite the Council's decision to invade, unease clawed at him. He had fought alongside these humans once, long ago, and he had seen something in them that even the Empire's advanced technology could not account for. Something that now, in the shadow of imminent conquest, filled him with dread. "The humans will resist," he said quietly, though no one was listening. "And they won't fight the way we expect." The first wave of the invasion began in a remote desert region. Empire soldiers descended in shimmering dropships, their sleek exosuits gleaming under the blazing sun. Their orders were simple: secure the region, eliminate resistance, and establish a foothold. They moved with military precision, their movements guided by tactical AI, their weapons calibrated for maximum efficiency. But the desert was silent. Too silent. The squad leader raised a hand, signaling a halt. Their scanners showed no life signs, no heat signatures, nothing but the barren expanse of sand and rock. It wasn't right. The first explosion shattered the stillness, a crude but powerful device that sent sand and shrapnel raining down. Chaos erupted as the soldiers scrambled for cover, their advanced technology struggling to identify the source of the attack. From the dunes, human fighters emerged like ghosts, their faces obscured by scarves, their weapons mismatched but deadly. The Empire soldiers returned fire, their plasma rifles lighting up the desert. But the humans didn't fight head-on. They struck quickly, retreating before the Empire could organize a proper counterattack. As one squad moved to flank the human fighters, they were funneled into a narrow ravine. where another explosion buried them under a cascade of rock. By the time reinforcements arrived, the desert was empty once more. The human fighters had vanished, leaving only the wreckage of the Empire's arrogance. On board the flagship, Krell reviewed the reports with grim satisfaction. He could picture it clearly. The humans using the terrain to their advantage, exploiting the Empire's overconfidence. It was exactly what he had warned the Council about, but they had refused to listen. In a meeting chamber bathed in cold, artificial light, the Council convened to discuss the unexpected resistance. High Chancellor Voris, his holographic form towering over the others, dismissed the reports with a wave of his hand. A minor setback, he declared. We underestimated their resourcefulness. Nothing more. The next strike will be decisive. Krell kept silent, but his fists clenched at his sides. He had seen the footage from the desert. The humans weren't just resourceful. They were relentless. And they were learning. The next strike came in the dense forests of Eastern Europe. Empire soldiers descended once again, their cloaking systems shimmering as they moved through the undergrowth. They expected resistance, but they were confident their superior technology would prevail. They were wrong. The first warning came as the squad's communication systems began to glitch. Static crackled in their earpieces, and their HUDs flickered with distorted images. Before they could investigate, the trees themselves seemed to come alive. Tripwires triggered explosives hidden in the underbrush, sending soldiers flying. Human fighters emerged from camouflage positions, their movements swift and coordinated. The Empire soldiers fought back, but the humans had anticipated their every move. They used the forest to their advantage, setting traps and using hit-and-run tactics to keep the Empire off balance. By the time the battle was over, the Empire had lost more than just soldiers. They had lost their aura of invincibility. On board the flagship, Krell stood with a young officer named Elin Rias, who had been monitoring the conflict. Her expression was one of growing unease. They're not fighting like we expected, she said, echoing Krell's own thoughts. They never do, Krell replied. And that's why we're losing. Elin hesitated. What do we do? Krell didn't answer. He didn't know. All he knew was that the Council's arrogance was leading them down a path they couldn't turn back from. The Empire escalated the conflict, deploying larger forces to a major industrial city in North America. The strategy was clear: overwhelm the humans with sheer numbers and firepower. Armored vehicles rolled through the city's streets, their energy weapons reducing buildings to rubble. Troops in exosuits moved with mechanical precision, sweeping through block by block. At first, it seemed the Empire would finally succeed. The human resistance was scattered, their forces struggling to hold their ground. But as the Empire pushed deeper into the city, the tide began to turn. The humans didn't confront the Empire head-on. They used the city itself as a weapon, luring the Empire into ambushes and collapsing entire buildings to trap their enemies. In one instance, an Empire officer led a squad into what appeared to be an abandoned factory, only to trigger a massive explosion that leveled the structure. A young Empire soldier, separated from his unit in the chaos, found himself cornered by a group of human fighters. He raised his weapon, his hands shaking, but the humans didn't fire. Instead, their leader, a woman with sharp eyes and a scar running down her cheek, lowered her rifle. "Go back to your Empire," she said, her voice cold. "Tell them we're not afraid of you." The soldier didn't argue. When he was later debriefed, he could only repeat her words, his voice trembling with the weight of them. On board the flagship, Krell watched the reports with a mix of admiration and dread. The humans weren't just resisting, they were winning. And the Empire, for all its power, was beginning to fracture under the weight of its own hubris. "The Council won't admit it," Elin said, standing beside him. "But they're starting to realize you were right." Krell shook his head. "It doesn't matter. They'll keep throwing resources at this war until there's nothing left. And by then, it'll be too late." Below them, Earth burned, but its spirit remained unbroken. The humans were fighting for more than survival. They were fighting for their home, their freedom, and their very existence. And in the face of such determination, even the mightiest empire could falter. The shimmering expanse of the Galactic Council chamber seemed almost to mock Krell Zinther as he stood in its heart, his battle-worn armor contrasting sharply with the polished grandeur surrounding him. The room was a temple of power, its crystalline walls pulsating with light, projecting the flickering holograms of the Council's esteemed members. Each figure was an icon of imperial dominance, their expressions haughty and unmoved. They loomed over Krell, their translucent forms dwarfing him. But it wasn't their size that made him feel small, it was their arrogance. "Earth is not what you think it is," Krell began, his voice hoarse but steady. "Its soldiers are not the primitive barbarians you believe them to be." High Chancellor Vorus, draped in his shimmering regalia, leaned forward with a sneer. "We've indulged this rhetoric before, Krell. Are you here to waste our time again with tales of human resilience? A backwater planet with no unified military and outdated weapons cannot stand against the Empire." Krell's scarred face tightened, but he refused to waver. Their weapons don't make them dangerous. Their spirit does. Their unpredictability. You see weakness in their chaos, but it's their greatest strength. I've fought them, and I'm telling you, if we underestimate them, we'll pay a price we cannot afford. A younger counselor scoffed. The only price will be the wasted time it takes to subdue them. Perhaps we should thank you for softening them up during your unfortunate campaign. The words stung, but Krell kept his composure. His memories of Earth were not stories of conquest, but survival. He remembered the grit in their soldiers' eyes, the way they fought with their backs against the wall, and how their determination turned the tides of battles that should have been impossible to win. "You don't understand," Krell said, his voice sharper now, cutting through the counselor's laughter. "They fight for each other, for something greater than themselves. You think them disorganized, but their chaos hides a unity we can't comprehend. They will not bow easily." Vorus waved a hand, the hologram's light shimmering with the gesture. "Enough. The Empire has already decided. Earth will join the fold, whether by diplomacy or force. If they resist, they will be taught the futility of defiance. That is all, Krell." As the Council's lights dimmed and their holograms faded, Krell stood alone in the chamber. His warning had been dismissed, his words cast aside as the paranoia of an aging soldier. He knew what would happen next, and though part of him wanted to wash his hands of it all, another part, a deeper, more resolute part, couldn't let go. The Empire's fleet descended upon Earth like a metallic storm, their ships blanketing the skies, their technology so advanced it seemed otherworldly to the planet's inhabitants. The initial demands for surrender were met with confusion, then defiance. Governments scrambled to respond. Military forces attempted to organize, but Earth's defenders seemed hopelessly outmatched. The first strike teams met with limited resistance. Small towns and outposts fell quickly, their populations either fleeing or captured. It seemed, at first, that the Council's predictions were correct. But then, as the Empire moved deeper into Earth's territories, everything changed. In a dense jungle in Southeast Asia, a detachment of elite Empire soldiers moved with precision, their exosuits shimmering as they blended into the foliage. Their objective was a human communication outpost, a seemingly vulnerable target that would cripple Earth's ability to coordinate. As they approached the structure, their tactical AI began to malfunction. The first explosion came from beneath their feet, a crude but devastating mine that tore through the squad's lead formation. The survivors regrouped, their cloaking systems flickering, only to be ambushed by human soldiers who seemed to melt out of the jungle itself. Their weapons were outdated, their armor mismatched, but they moved with a purpose and ferocity that no amount of training could have prepared the Empire for. The jungle became a death trap. Tripwires, improvised explosives, and relentless guerrilla tactics turned every step into a potential disaster. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found the communication outpost destroyed, the Empire's technology scavenged, and no sign of the human soldiers who had done it. Krell watched the reports from aboard the flagship, his stomach tightening with every detail. He had seen it before. The ingenuity, the relentlessness. Earth soldiers didn't fight by the rules the Empire understood. They fought with desperation, with creativity, and with a unity born of survival. In a war zone in Eastern Europe, the Empire launched a massive offensive to crush what they believed to be a major human resistance cell. Dozens of armored transports rolled across the fields, their energy weapons tearing through human defenses. It was a display of overwhelming power, and for a time, it seemed unstoppable. But as the Empire forces reached the outskirts of a bombed-out city, they encountered something unexpected. The humans had prepared for them, using the city's ruins to their advantage. Every street became a choke point, every building a sniper's nest. They didn't meet the Empire head-on. They lured them in, striking from the shadows and then disappearing. The turning point came when an Empire officer attempted to take what seemed to be an undefended warehouse. His squad moved in cautiously, scanning for traps but found nothing. As they relaxed, the ground beneath them erupted in flames. A group of human engineers had rigged the entire structure to collapse, taking the Empire soldiers with it. By the time the Empire realized the scope of the humans' tactics, it was too late. Their forces were scattered, their vehicles immobilized, and their soldiers demoralized. What should have been a decisive victory had turned into a costly retreat. Krell paced the observation deck of the flagship, his thoughts racing. The Council was learning, bit by bit, what he had tried to tell them. But he knew they wouldn't admit their mistake. They would double down, throw more resources at the problem, and escalate the conflict until there was no turning back. Elin Rios, a junior officer with a sharp mind and an unshakable curiosity, found him there. "You warned them, didn't you?" she asked softly. Krell turned, surprised to see her. "I did. They didn't listen." She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the planet below. "I've seen the reports. The humans, they don't fight like anyone we've ever faced." "No," Krell said. "They don't. And the Council's arrogance will cost us more than we can imagine." Elin hesitated. "Do you think we can win?" Krell didn't answer right away. He knew the truth, but saying it aloud felt like admitting defeat. Finally, he said, "This isn't about victory anymore. It's about survival. For them and for us." Below them, Earth's lights flickered in defiance, a reminder that the battle was far from over. The Empire had underestimated its enemy, and now, the reckoning Krell had foreseen was unfolding before his eyes.